I'm Tom Sarachan, and I promise you that most of my slides are not just text on a blank background. A little bit about me. I'm a lawyer turned game designer, and currently I'm pursuing a MFA in game design at the NYU Game Center. There I'm working with two other designers, Zach Barish and Danny Nanny, to create a game we're calling The Last Light Runners. It's a game that tries to capture the immediate, easy-to-learn fun of classic arcade games and incorporate everything we've learned in the past 40-odd years as a field about good cooperative design. And tonight, I'd like to share with you some things we've learned through research and through testing and iterating our own game about making good cooperative experiences. And I don't think there's a better place to start than what I call the dependency spectrum. Cooperative games can be put on a spectrum based on to what extent one player's ability to play is gated by another player's success. So in other words, do you have to play well for me to do my cool thing? And there's probably no better example of that than football. Just to execute this actually pretty basic running play, the center has to snap correctly to the quarterback, and the quarterback has to give the ball to the running back, but the running back can't go anywhere or do anything yet. First, all the players on the right side of the center have to block somebody to make a hole for the running back. And at that point, the running back can actually go. And if any of this goes wrong, then the running back doesn't get to do anything right now. And everybody's effort is wasted. So this is the high dependency experience. It's like an assembly line. You have to do your thing, and then I'm going to do my thing, and then the next player. The thing about high dependency situations is that the feeling of teamwork is extremely strong. You're really aware of the other players all the time. You're relying on them. The team matters to you. And when things are going well, it feels great. It's really impressive. It's a clockwork machine doing something amazing. The problem is, when something goes wrong, you can tell who it was. The quarterback dropped the ball. It's their fault. You should fire them. And so high dependency games tend toward high intra-group conflict. This is the problem we see in online team games with people yelling at each other, right? I needed you to do something, you didn't do it, now I'm mad at you. On the flip side is low dependency. And I don't think there's a better example of this than Olympic team archery. In Olympic team archery, you are going to go up and you're going to shoot your arrow at the target. And your score is added to your team's score. There's nothing your teammates can do to help you. There's nothing they can do to hurt you. It's your moment. You get to shine based on your own ability. And the cool thing is, it's your moment, and you're the superstar. The problem is, these games are vulnerable to the classic criticism that's raised of some Euro games, if you're familiar with tabletop games. This is multiplayer solitaire. There's really a single-player game here, and your teammates just kind of don't really matter. There's not a right place to be on the spectrum. It's not that one side or the middle is better. It's that whatever you pick, you're making a trade-off. And when you make that trade-off, you should understand what it is so that you can make up for the thing that you're not getting. If you're not getting team feeling, then you're going to need to figure out where to go to get it. If you're getting high intra-group conflict, you're going to need to figure out how to resolve it. As a quick aside, some of you may have played Overcooked. This came out last year. It's a cooperative game in which all the players are short order cooks. And you're trying to get food out as fast as possible. And there are lots of things in your way. As you can see, the kitchen is not always as ergonomically designed as it could be. There's a lot of time pressure, and frankly, you're just under each other's feet. The game is designed to make you get in each other's way. And one thing that I think is really cool about Overcooked is that in some ways, it's a game about the spectrum. It's a game where you start in this very high dependency situation, where you're constantly getting in each other's way. You need the other person to do something and they're not doing it. And the way you succeed is to build yourself into a lower dependency game, where you can do your thing very reliably without needing anybody else to get out from under you. You've worked it all out and everything is smooth now. It's a cool game, and I think it's kind of a reminder that all these things we use to think about game design, all these lenses we look at it through, all these theories we have about it, you can roll them right back into games. And you can turn them into things for players to do and explore and experiment with. And I think that's really cool about game design as a field, and now let's actually move on. So suppose you've figured out where you are on the dependency spectrum, and you're in a high dependency situation. So now you need to reduce intra-group conflict. There are a variety of strategies for this, and here are a couple. The first is everyone is always helping. And I don't think there's a better poster child for this than Forbidden Desert. If you're not familiar with it, it's a tabletop game, a board game, where you are searching for treasure in the desert. But there's a sandstorm coming, and so you have to look for the treasure, but you also need to dig out from under the sandstorm. You need to keep from getting buried. And you're in a desert, so you need to keep getting water and maybe bringing it to other people. And the key thing about Forbidden Desert is that all of these actions are useful. No one is ever dead weight in Forbidden Desert. Yeah. You should thirst for survival, and frankly, it is kind of a thirsty game. It might be good to like play with water next to you. But all the art is about being in a really dry, hot desert. But the fun thing about this is that there's never a sense of like, this person right here is the anchor weighing us down. Because whatever they're doing is good. It might not be the best thing, it might not be what you want them to do, but they're helping. And so people generally aren't getting angry at each other playing Forbidden Desert. And I compare this to something like League of Legends. In this picture, Nami up top is just out of position. She's not helping. She's in the wrong place. And you can tell she's in the wrong place. And so she's the anchor dragging her carry down. And this is a situation that very easily produces group conflict. So when you can create a situation where everyone is helping and actions are always good, even if they're not best, then that does a lot to keep the group calm with each other. And I should say, by the way, I know I'm using League of Legends as like the counterexample here. But Riot Games actually, I think, is a real leader in the field in thinking about how to make team games work. And their work has not only been very valuable, their transparency about their work has been really informative. So, although League of Legends is up here as a game that makes people fight with each other, I think Riot is actually doing a really great job of thinking about these issues and taking the lead in making these games better. A second thing you can do is keep the blame diffuse. And I see a couple people smiling. I think they're familiar with Pandemic. Pandemic is a game about trying to cure dread diseases before they wipe out humanity. And it's an incredibly complex system. There's lots of things to do. You need to cure diseases, but you also need to treat symptoms until you cure the disease. And you need to travel around to do this. And the resources you're using to cure the disease might be better used to travel. And you're doing it all in an environment where a randomly selected city is having the disease get worse, but it's a rigged deck, so you kind of know which cities are more likely to get worse when. It's this really complicated optimization problem. Thematically, maybe yes. In play, very different. You know, I haven't played a lot of Resident Evil, but I don't know. Is it maybe there are optimization problems with Resident Evil? Oh, I never saw it. But so the thing that you see happening in Pandemic is that it's hard to tell what the best move is. By keeping the best move uncertain, it's hard post hoc to say we lost because Tom messed up. Tom was making bad plays. And because you can't identify the best move and you can't identify who's doing it wrong, again, intra-group conflict is much reduced. And we can compare this to, for example, Bill Buckner. I see some people laughing, they know the story. Bill Buckner arguably lost the World Series for the Red Sox. In extra innings, he let a ball go between his legs. Now the thing is, there's a fair argument that, you know, the game didn't have to be in extra innings. Like, if the other 8 players on the Red Sox keep the game out of extra innings, this never happens. And the curse of the Bambino ends a couple years sooner. But that's not what's remembered. What's remembered is Bill Buckner. Because it's easy in baseball to identify the right play and the wrong play, and this is sadly the wrong one. So the second strategy you can use to reduce intra-group conflict, make it hard to tell what the very best play is. Keep blame for losses diffuse so that the team feels responsible. You see this in Pandemic. In Pandemic, people say, we lost. The game is hard. As opposed to, this person lost it for us. The third thing you can do, and I'm going to let my lawyer side out for a minute here and talk to you about procedural justice. Procedural justice is the idea that people will accept outcomes they don't like if they think the outcome was arrived at in a fair way. And there's a couple things that consistently lead to this, and this is something that legal scholars know about. A lot of the court system is designed to help provide this. But you also see it, for example, in organizational management. This is something people think about when raises are being handed out. Studies have shown that people are much more okay with not getting a raise if they feel like who got them was fairly decided. So how do you bring about procedural justice? Well, there's a couple things you need. First, you need good decision making. So for example, the decision should be based on some kind of evidence. And the decision maker should be a fair, neutral party. In addition, good treatment by the decision maker is a big deal. Being polite goes a long way. And if the decision maker is treating the people affected by the decision in a kind and polite manner, again, people are much more likely to accept the decision they're getting. And again, it's not about the result. The whole point of procedural justice is that this is a way to deal with the situation where not everyone is going to get what they want. But you want people to accept it so the group can move forward. So how does this come up in games? Well, have you ever had this happen to you? If you've played League of Legends, you might have. For a long time, this was a very common way for people to get the role they wanted in the game. During the selection process, someone would be really angry, and they would threaten to tank the team if they didn't get what they wanted. And this obviously is a problem, right? Because suppose you want to be mid, and somebody's just putting this in the chat. And so you're like, all right, they can be mid. I'm angry about it because I think maybe I'm better than them. I could help the team more, but I'm going to give them what they want, fine. Because I don't want to deal with their negativity. I don't want to deal with this angry person. I don't want to have this confrontation during a time-pressured part of the game. But then you bring that anger into the game with you. And the game as a whole is starting to get to be a more negative experience. And I think it's really interesting that in Riot's new Champion Select system, the way they talk about it is completely the language of procedural justice. It's, you're going to get to pick what role you want to play. Sometimes we will not be able to give it to you because queue times are getting very long. There's an oversupply of what you want to play. If that happens, we might ask you to play something different. But we know that's bad for you and we want to be fair. So we're never going to do that to you when it's a match that could rank you up, because we understand that those matches are higher stakes for you. And if we ask you to do it, we will never ask you to do it twice in a row, because we don't want you to have to carry more than your fair share of weight. We'll spread it out. Again, they're not guaranteeing you the decision you want. They're not guaranteeing you the result you want. They're guaranteeing you that whatever the result is, it'll be fair to you. And they're hoping, and they have the data, I'm hoping it's working out for them. They're hoping that this is going to lead to people being more accepting of the role decision that ultimately comes out of the process. So when you're thinking about this kind of group decision, what are we going to do? It can be a big help to think about not just what is the group's decision going to be, but how is that decision going to be made in your game? And what can the systems of your game do to help make that feel fair? There's something you might not want to focus on, and that's incentive structures. And in some ways, we've learned that incentive structures are not the ideal solution. People have been banning people from things on the internet since there was something on the internet to ban you from. And somehow this negative incentive has never quite managed to control behavior. This isn't actually completely surprising. This is Paul Robinson, a professor of criminal law at the University of Pennsylvania Law School. And Professor Robinson has studied a lot how the criminal law works and doesn't work, and when people are and are not deterred from doing things they shouldn't be doing. And he points out that humans just make cognitive errors. They're things that we do wrong that are just endemic to the human condition, perhaps. And in particular, we tend to undervalue things based on their uncertainty and the delay before they happen. So if you are thinking about, am I gonna get banned for doing this bad thing? Well, maybe you don't get caught at all. And frankly, I've never seen anybody banned in the middle of a game. So I'm gonna get to play. And maybe somewhere down the line, something bad happens, but the delay makes it feel less bad. The uncertainty makes it feel less bad. And all of these things are reducing the deterrent power of the incentive structure that you set up. And the trouble is that in games, just as in law, the incentives suffer these problems. They're always going to be uncertain. They're always going to be delayed. And so they're weaker than you think. Now you might figure, no problem, I'll make them real strong. I will make them certain, and I will make them fast. If you can do that, that would be great. But it's expensive. It takes a lot of resources to catch all the bad things that should be negatively reinforced, and to catch all the good things that should be positively reinforced, and to make the reinforcement happen real quick. The federal government and state government and local government have all these resources, and even they can't overcome these issues, with all their investigative power. So as you're designing a game, if you're envisioning these post hoc incentives for behavior, just be aware you're going down a road that is resource intensive on an ongoing basis. This might not be the solution you want. A solution that's built into the game might work out better for you. If nothing else, it's almost sure to be cheaper. So let's suppose you've dealt with the problems inherent to your place on the dependency spectrum. You've dealt with intra-group conflict. You've made sure it feels like a team. Or have you? What if it doesn't feel like a team? What if so far it kind of feels like multiplayer solitaire? And how will you know? How will you be able to check to see whether you're getting a good team dynamic? This is something that Danny Nanny, one of the designers I'm working with, has studied, and he brought up the work of Logan King and Fisher Wright on kind of this stages of tribal leadership. And you can see groups kind of categorized in different ways. At the first level is the group of independent operators who are sort of allied against a harsh world. And then moving on in the stages, you reach independent operators who have some group sense. They want the group to succeed as a group, but they're still more or less out for themselves. And I don't mean to cast any aspersions on the Eagles here, but this is kind of a common dynamic in professional sports, right? People are trying to help the team win. They're also thinking about the fact that it's a contract year. And then at the highest levels, you get groups that are motivated by a group identity. They want the group to resist another group. They have a rival that they want to challenge, or they're just enjoying the game. In some ways, they've even, I kind of think of it as transcended the competition. They just enjoy what they're doing and they want to do it and they're good at doing it together. And so in a group game, you might look for these dynamics. You might try to figure out, where are people in this? Are they working together only because I'm pushing them together? Are they working together because they have a sense of groupness, if you will? Excuse me. It's not easy to design for this. Frank Lance, the director of the Game Center, said to me that it might be that the real answer is you can't, except by making the game good. If the game is good, people will want to be good at it, and they'll enjoy playing it, and they'll naturally start to come together as a group. And frankly, Frank is right about a lot of things. So I hesitate to ever argue with him. But one thing we have tried with some success is interviewing people after playtesting and talking to them about their experience of the group qua the group, their experience of how their awareness of the group was in play. So first we ask, were you talking to each other? And we observe to say, were you talking to each other? Were you coordinating? Did you communicate with your partners about what you want them to do? And again, this is something you can just see. We also ask them about, were you aware of where your teammates were? Were you aware of what they were doing? Because often the higher levels of group dynamic start to see nonverbal communication. The 96 Bulls that we saw earlier, part of what made them so good was that they had practiced together, trained together, played together, and their offense was designed, as I understand it, around a fast pace where they didn't need to talk about what was happening. They had trained to the point where when they saw something happening on the court, they knew the other teammate will be doing this. And therefore, I can go with their support, and I don't need to confirm their support. I don't need to talk to them about whether they're going to support me. I know they're doing it. So you're looking for that nonverbal communication. Because if you're seeing that, it might look like, oh, they're not talking to each other? They're not coordinating? That doesn't seem great. But they might actually be coordinating, and your game is succeeding more than you think. So ask people, were you aware of your teammates? Were you aware of what they were doing? Can you give examples? You're looking for these higher levels of coordination. So you've solved all these problems, except what for some games is the biggest problem. Is your game fun? And fun isn't always the goal, but if it is, you want it. And sometimes you don't have it yet. And Zach Barish, again, one of my partners at the Game Center, has done some work on cooperative player types in an effort to answer the question, what do people want out of a cooperative game? What is fun for them? And he's identified 3. The first is the friend. And the friend wants to share the experience of the game. We see this in Cho'Gall. If you're familiar with Heroes of the Storm, this is a character that 2 players work together to play. But also, there's games like Life Force, and I'm hoping I'm not the only person in the room old enough to have ever played Life Force. But Life Force is a classic Nintendo shmup where there's a limited number of continues that are shared between the 2 players. So when someone dies, you literally have the opportunity to bring them back to life. And this is the kind of thing that works really well for friend players. They want opportunities to experience their relationship with this other person through the game, maybe to build that relationship, and actions where they can help or support another player, work together with them, are a lot of fun for them. That's what they're looking for in cooperative games. The second player type might be familiar to anybody who knows Mark Rosewater, his well-known player Psychographics for Magic, the Spike. And Spike wants to compete. The fact that it's a cooperative game doesn't change the fact that Spike wants to compete. And we see this, for example, in IndyCar racing. There are teams in IndyCar racing, but only one person is going to win the Indy 500. And while it's understood that you should support your teammates, it's also understood that everyone wants to be the preeminent member of the team, the winner of the Indy 500. So Spike wants to compete with the other players on the team, wants opportunities to show they're the better player, wants opportunities to challenge themselves and the other player, even within this cooperative environment. Third, I don't think there's a better example of the Colossus than this right here. And the Colossus wants to feel special during the game. They want to be noticed. And their teammates are this ready-made audience for what they're doing. So the Colossus just wants to walk around blowing up, even though it's actually not good for the team. And it seems like the computer's having a little trouble with the video, but the video is just Colossus walking around exploding all the time. And the other players trying to set up combos, and I'm gonna knock this person into you. No, Colossus just walked up and exploded. And that's just it. Because Colossus wants to feel special, and their teammates are the audience that's going to help them feel special. So the Colossus wants big stuff they can do that's going to get them noticed. I think Heroes of the Storm actually really does a good job of accommodating all of these player types, even in the post-match screen. So you can see what's happening here is it's showing all these stats about 5 of the 10 players in the game. And for the friend, there's the opportunity down at the bottom, the arrows, to vote for a teammate or potentially even an opponent who you think did really well. So you can support them one last time. For the spike, the competitor, there's all these stats, and you're the best at something. Maybe you're the MVP in the match. Your team won, but you were the most valuable player. And if you weren't the most valuable player, well, maybe you were the siege master. You did the most damage to structures. It's giving you all these axes you can compete on. And then if you're the Colossus, it's hard to get more noticed than being a person with wings that appear to be on fire in the middle of the screen, and you're bigger than everyone else. So even in this tiny slice of gameplay, Heroes of the Storm is accommodating all three types, giving each of them the fun they want out of the game. So let's summarize. What do you want to do when you're thinking about a cooperative game? You want to know where you are on the dependency spectrum. Are you a high dependency game? Are you a low dependency game? If you're a high dependency game, you're going to need to think about intra-group conflict and how to limit it. You might limit it by making sure that every action is helping. Or you might keep the blame diffuse. And notice how those two work together. If every action is helping, it's even harder to blame someone for playing badly. You might use procedural justice and use systems to help people make fair decisions so that they can then be satisfied when the decision isn't the one they want. You may wish to de-emphasize incentives in your design because they're resource intensive on an ongoing basis. Look for nonverbal coordination, because that can be a sign that your group is actually playing better together than you thought. And you'll want to ask about that. You'll want to do interviews and confirm that that's what's happening. And see to it, to the greatest extent possible, that you're appealing to all three cooperative player types. You're giving the friend opportunities to share things with the other players. You're giving Spike the opportunity to compete with her teammates. You're giving Colossuses the opportunity to feel special. And as always, remember that these are guidelines that have helped us, but they may be different for you. And so if you're designing a game that somehow isn't on the dependency spectrum, and not everyone is always helping, and it's only for Colossuses and it has nothing for Spike and for friends, please let me know. That sounds really neat, and I'd love to play it. Thank you all. I really appreciate you coming out. I'll be happy to take any questions.